Hello, and welcome to CommWeek 2020. My name is Roby McEwen, and I am an instructor in the advertising sequence of UTA's Department of Communication. Thank you for joining us today for this panel discussion featuring alumni of our program. Our guest speakers include Erika Long. Erika is a senior account manager at Belo Company on the enterprise team. She works with large enterprise clients such as Carter's, PenFed Credit Union, and Heartland Dental. She previously worked at companies that have a technology-first focus, where her clients included Texas Instruments, GameStop, Kaiser Permanente, Salvation Army, Ford, and Chevrolet. Erika previously served as president of Add2 Dallas, a young professionals advertising organization that aims to meet the needs of Dallas young advertising, marketing, and communication professionals and students. Our next panelist is Bethanne Glover. Bethanne Glover is an account manager at Balcom Agency. She serves clients including world-famous salsa brand Mrs. Renfro's, Revolutionary Fort Worth Veterinary Clinic, The Park, and Regional Dairy Council Dairy Max. Bethanne freelanced for Kissabeth Furniture and Curley & Company while she was still earning her degree at UTA. She's earned the highest honor of the American Advertising Federation's annual advertising competition at the local level, as well as an award for the district level and multiple Silver Addy Awards at the national level. Bethanne serves as the programs committee on the programs committee for Add2 Dallas. And finally, our third panelist is Stephanie Hillas. Stephanie is a senior account executive at Publicis Experiences. She has worked for blue chip brands including Capital One, the North Face, Cadillac, Delta Dental, and more. She has been with the Publicis Groupe since 2015, and her most recent work includes helping Jared, the jewelry store, launch a free customizable virtual wedding experience for couples whose weddings were impacted due to COVID-19. Our moderator today is advertising and broadcast major Alex Rojas. And now I'll turn it over to our moderator, Alex.
All right, thank you, Roby. All right, thank you, ladies, again for joining us today and for doing this panel. So my first question that I want to ask y'all, and Erika, I'll start with you, is what makes you wake up and get to work?
Well, I think the excitement of figuring out what the next project is. I'm pretty plugged into my email, so a lot of the times there will be off-the-wall requests from clients. And honestly, I love challenges. Love to dive in head first into something that might be a little bit difficult. And so when I see something that pops up, I'm like, ooh, this is my opportunity to dig in. And so it gets me excited for the day. It gets me ramped up. And then also my coworkers. My coworkers are pretty awesome. They make every day more fun. We like to talk about life before we talk about work, just because during this COVID time, it's hard to stay plugged in. So a lot of new updates are happening with everyone, and it's really fun to look forward to like speaking to them another day to say, hey, what are you doing?
Awesome. Bethanne, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I would have to say kind of a similar answer. I really just love challenges and knowing that you can help a client solve a problem that maybe they've been looking at the same way for a long time, and just really having that different lens to see it through and come up with those creative solutions, and just really gets my brain going. And also working with really smart, creative people. It's just kind of our people. Not everyone in the world is super creative, and so it's awesome going to work every day and being around people who are just constantly innovating and wanting to see what the next best thing is and how we can always improve. So it's really exciting to help clients, solve their problems and make everyone's life better.
Awesome. Yeah, Stephanie, for you?
Sure. I think for me, it's inherently the work that experiential does. I'm relatively new to this kind of field. I've only been in it for a couple years, but it's a big shift in terms of you're doing activations in person with people, which is obviously impacted due to COVID right now. So it's just been really challenging and interesting to figure out how can we keep momentum and help brands prioritize experiences, but in the age of COVID. And then similar to what Bethanne and Erika said, my team, I'm very lucky to work with people that I genuinely enjoy being around. I think if that wasn't the case, it would be a lot harder to get up and go to work and be super excited to dive in. So I think it's a combination of both of those things.
Awesome. All right. So my next question is, you all talked about the creative challenges that you experience with the client. So Bethanne, I'll start off with you. What has been one challenge that comes to mind that's really stuck out to you?
During the COVID times?
During COVID or just during your time in your position?
I think just the biggest thing is that things happen so quick. Like things can change so quickly. So that's been kind of a challenge, just learning to adapt. And, you have this idea of that everything is going to go this one way, and your whole team has spent a long time planning and working out all the details. And then something that's totally out of your control, for instance, a pandemic. And it just totally kind of erases all those plans, and getting the team all back together and just like learning to pivot really quick. That's been a big challenge, but it's really put people to the test, especially not being in a room together and having to connect digitally, getting those meetings and those things happening, getting everyone on board when we're not physically together. So I would say that's been a challenge in this current climate.
Yeah, definitely. Stephanie, for you?
I'm going to mimic what Bethanne said. And I think particularly what's been very challenging is trying to figure out the work from home balance. And working with people who have families or loved ones at home that they're taking care of. I think it's inherently always communication is probably the most challenging, which is ironic because it's the communications industry. But I think we're making a point to over communicate with your clients, with your team members. To Bethanne's point, things are constantly changing. I would say that's probably what I've experienced thus far.
Okay. And Erika?
Yeah, I would have to agree with Bethanne and Stephanie. It's a struggle to stay at home and to understand the balance of like, I'm home, but I'm not home because I'm still online and working and in that environment. But at the same time, it's about that balance. And then things do change extremely fast. And you have to be able to pivot super quick from one little thing that might pop up with, for example, Carter's, we're reopening stores. And as we're reopening these stores, we hit a snag where Google just couldn't process the amount of uploads that we were doing. And you literally have to figure out like, well, how do we keep everyone updated? And how do you talk to another team to say, hey, in the meantime, while we figure out this problem over here, I need you guys to go and communicate this over here to really help balance it out. And that has been the struggle, especially right now. And constant communication is the theme, and different things are popping out that are preventing you from being able to do something. And you have to just really quickly stop, think, and then pivot as fast as you can.
Definitely, yeah. All right, so let me see. We have a couple questions that we had already set to go. Let's see. So how do you sort of handle the work-life balance? I guess Stephanie, we'll start off with you this time, and you can go over that.
For sure. So admittedly, I'm not great at it. It's something that I think everyone probably continues to struggle with a little bit, COVID or not. I think the biggest things that I've learned are, again, over communication with my boss, with my team. I guess in the time of COVID right now, it's really easy to be kind of chained to your desk, so to speak. So I've made it a point to tell, my team members at 5 every day or somewhere around there, I have to go outside. I have to go for a walk. I have to step away if the work's not done, and then I'll pick back up where I left off. I think delegating is a big thing too. It's very easy to just raise your hand or want to be, the person who says like, oh, I can do this, I can do that. But I think between delegation, communication, and just making a point to carve out time to get work done, that can sometimes be challenging when there's back-to-back meetings. So it just comes down to prioritization and communication.
Yeah. Erika, what about you?
No, I completely agree. I think the biggest challenge for me is trying to understand, and I just recently moved, and so I think this is just probably unique to that situation, is just trying to understand how I balance out my day versus the things that I want to do in my personal life. Now that I'm home and I'm home frequently, it's a lot easier for me to say, okay, I need a break. Let me just sweep the floor. And honestly, it sounds weird and mindless, but it lets my brain relax for a second. And I found that like just doing those tasks and taking my, what I would consider coffee breaks that I would have taken in the office as a chance to be able to get something done in the house has really helped me stay calm throughout the day. To be able to say, okay, I can't figure out this problem, but I've been working on this problem for 2 straight hours and I just need to walk away. And I've learned that those small breaks, whether they be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or taking my lunch break early, have been vital in keeping me creative and keeping me on my toes to solve issues. Because without them, I think I would just mentally get so bogged down. And this is a time where mental health is a big thing. You're trapped at home almost, and it feels like you're stuck and you can't do anything. And so just constantly trying to make sure that, hey, I can do this. I have the time to just take a break. The world is not going to end. We are not curing cancer. This is not rocket science. We can solve these problems. We can take the 10-minute break and come back to it. I think I've found to be a huge relief during this time for work from home.
Yeah, definitely. Bethanne?
Yeah, I would agree. I think for me, I have kind of made it a point, my team, my boss, from 6 to 7 every single day. I go and do yoga. It's kind of been my thing for the last couple of years. And it's 1 hour a day. And it's kind of that time at the end of the day where all your meetings have finally ended. And it's really easy to just keep working on the projects that you actually needed to get done, but you've been tied up in meetings. And so kind of how Stephanie and Erika mentioned, like really just stepping away and setting that time aside and then coming back to it later. I do not work through lunch. I make a point. I always work through lunch when we were back at the office, but I make a point to take my dogs for like a little walk, or even if it's a 15-minute lunch, it's some lunch. Or listen to a podcast or a webinar, whether that's about the industry or just something I want to learn more about. I think just taking that time to kind of engage my brain in a different way that's not so zoned in on the problems that I'm working on at work, it helps me be more creative and helps me kind of get back in to what I'm working on at work with like a fresh focus and have better, just like be more concentrated on what I'm doing.
All right. Awesome. All right. So I have another question here. So kind of touching on how you said that when you are taking breaks, you're still stimulating, your creativity and you're listening to podcasts about the industry. So that kind of goes into this next question. What are some important skills that you believe students need to have in this industry, especially right now? And Erika, we'll go ahead and start off with you on that one.
Yeah, my biggest thing, and this has been a recurring thing from my current job, is initiative. Be prepared to be as curious as possible. Curiosity, I know everybody says curiosity killed the cat. It will not kill you in advertising, I promise. It is a good thing to ask those questions, to be curious, but then not only that, take it a step further and say, hey, I'm curious about this, I learned about it, and I'm willing to start the process on it. I can't tell you enough how much I've seen people come into the industry and wait to be told to do something. And it is super hard as like a senior level person or even a manager to spend the time to tell you what I need you to do on top of do all the meetings that I have for the day. It's so much easier to just hear that feedback, take it, and let you take that initiative. And for you to tell me, hey, I did it this way. And for me to say, okay, great. Or did we think about this? Or did we add something in? Then it is for me to sit there and write out a list. And that's probably the number one thing, that it's not something you can really teach, but if you can grasp it early on and throughout your career, and even as a student, just to be able to sit there and ask your professors, like, so why do that? Like, I don't understand why we would do that. And for them to actually be like, oh, wow, like I said something and someone actually asked me why. It's refreshing and it keeps things interesting, but it's a great skill set to learn early so that as you're going through your career, you're constantly doing the same thing.
All right. Yeah. And like initiative and leadership, I mean, those kind of go hand in hand as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So definitely seeking leadership positions in school would help out with that. Stephanie, what about you?
I think kind of similar along the lines of initiative, not being afraid to sound stupid or that you're going to ask a dumb question or you're going to look like you don't know what something is. I personally, when I started out, I had like this just paralyzing fear that I was going to be caught or called out because I didn't know what XYZ was, or somebody said something in a meeting and I was too afraid to go to my boss and be like, I don't understand. So kind of similar to initiative, no one's going to think you're dumb. There's no, I mean, I know people say there's no such thing as dumb questions, but even now I'll be in meetings and a client asks something, or a coworker, and I'm like, I don't know fully what that is. Let's talk about it. So it's not necessarily a skill, but yeah, just not being afraid. You're not expected to know everything, especially when you're starting out. So not being afraid to raise your hand, ask for help, want to learn more.
Yeah, every day's a learning curve, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Awesome. And then Bethanne?
I mean, I would have to echo both what Erika and Stephanie are both saying. Something else I think that's really important is to kind of do some soul searching about yourself. I think personality tests and really understanding like your core strengths and weaknesses. I know there's so many generic things that people put on their resumes, or maybe just kind of blanket statements. But I think that if you can really tune into what those curiosities about yourself and those key things that really make you tick, or you get passionate about, or you get fired up about, or you're maybe just like, that really is not for me. I think school and curriculum kind of teach you to be more well-rounded. But if you can really dive into those key personality traits, it can help you stand out and find something that's going to be more fulfilling for you. And you don't have to be everything to everyone. And I think just really understanding what you could be and just being a dreamer and learning about what you can give and not being afraid to show it.
All right, yeah, all really good, solid advice. Kind of sticking to the topic of college students. All right, so you're back in your college years, and you're still trying to figure stuff out. Is there anything that you would say directly to your college self about your career, or just about things in general? And Stephanie, we'll start off with you on that one.
Sure. I think if I were to go back and tell my postgraduate self, it would be don't have an open mind, and don't have I had this carved out path for how I thought my career was going to go, and I'm not at all where I thought I would be. I didn't know experiential was a thing. There was so much about the advertising world I wasn't aware of. And I think I'm so happy where I've ended up. But I think had I not been so rigid and linear in how I saw my career going, there could have been other opportunities I came across and missed. But I think that would be the best advice I could give.
Erika?
I think two things. I think one, I would tell myself I'm already vocal, but I think when it comes to career and understanding that, if you're too vocal or something happens, you have the potential to get fired. And I think that kept me in a fear. But I would tell myself, no, keep speaking up, keep saying what you feel like needs to be said in those conversations, because if that work environment isn't the right fit for you, the only way you're going to find out is if you speak up and you really understand it and get that theme. And I think that would be one big thing. And then I think the second thing would just be understanding and knowing that not everything is meant for you. I've literally been through 4 jobs, and that's not to say I've got fired or anything, but just curious about X, Y, or Z. Just curious about different positions and understanding okay, I work in technology, but do I really like technology? Is that really what I want to do? Or do I want to try this over here? And just being open-minded to go and do those things, because right now I'm young. I don't have any kids. It's not going to hurt me to swap jobs really fast. It's the only person that I'm depending on is myself. So it gives me the opportunity to be that flexible and to be able to say, hey, I want to do this, or hey, let me switch it up and try this out, because it might be something that I love. And kind of piggybacking off of Bethanne, it might be the thing that gives me the most joy and makes me feel the most fulfilled. But I don't know that if I don't step out of my comfort zone.
Definitely. Yeah. Just because you think one thing, you got to kind of jump around and figure out. I've heard that many times with professionals. Just kind of figuring out, oh, this is what I really want to do. Bethanne?
Yeah, I would say just to slow down and breathe. everything is going to be okay. You're going to find a job. Like, you're going to find a job you love. You're going to find people that you love working with. I think there's just so much pressure on that last semester to really like figure out what you're going to do next. And I kind of took a step back and did like some freelance work and kind of more eased into the industry. And it wasn't necessarily a traditional approach, but I wish back then that I would have been okay with that and not have worried so much that I was making the wrong decision and learned to just trust my gut. And yeah, just be okay with like living you're only in your 20s once, and you're going to make mistakes, and it's okay. Life will go on, and not to be so hard on yourself.
All right. Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so I guess tell me a little bit more about the things that you're involved in outside of just like your position. Erika had mentioned, or was mentioned, that you were a part of Add to Dallas. So could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So in college, I was vice president of AAF at UTA, which was super awesome and super helpful. But I was graduating in that semester, so I was only in that position for a semester, which I think was probably the most beneficial semester that I had, because I was reconnected with people that I knew that had graduated before me. So Allison, McCassin is her new last name, and then also Michael Magnus, who used to be a professor at UT Arlington, who graduated honestly 2-3 years before me, but I knew them from my basic classes that I was taking, who had started Ad2, had been in the ad industry, had taught me a few things. And when I graduated, it was a great bridge. Like, I was in AF, I transitioned straight into Ad2 Dallas as the programs chair, and eventually worked my way up to be the president, which was 2 years ago now. And it was extremely fulfilling and rewarding. It's a great experience. It kept me connected. But I will say the number one thing that it did for me, I work at digital agencies and technology agencies. I do not do traditional. I do not do creative. That is not part of my wheelhouse of knowledge. And I got to meet so many friends with that expertise. And I feel like it makes me well-rounded to be able to have conversations with people that do things that I do not experience on a daily basis. But it also gave me experience in those things. So our public service campaign, all driven by creative processes. I've never been an AE for a creative agency, and that, honestly, I got pulled into it enough to be able to learn, like, hey, whenever you do a campaign brief, this is exactly what they're looking for. And this is what they're learning. And those are things that I did not get and would not have gotten from my current job. And that made me extremely thankful. It also connected me with media buyers and planners. Again, not as much on my wheelhouse, because in the digital age, everything's done via technology. So programmatic APIs that are doing all the things that you need to do, like not necessarily you pulling all these levers. And so I got to enjoy the experience of doing those things. And then even after my presidency, I got to teach people and bring them in and get them to understand and learn what that does for them in their career futuristically. It also gave me some super amazing leadership skills. I was on the phone with my boss this morning, and he was like, "Why are you asking me about your coworker?" I was like, she got hired about a month ago, and I just want to make sure she's okay. And he's like, "I appreciate you doing that. You don't have to be concerned about it." But I think from being the president of an organization and constantly wanting to make sure everyone's okay, that work-life balance is good, and making sure everyone's having fun, it kind of stuck with me to be like, okay, let me check on my coworkers now. Let me make sure everyone's having a great time. Like, how can I make everyone happy? And it's just a skill and a trait that stuck with me throughout my career as well.
Awesome. All really good stuff, really good experience. Bethanne, anything that you're involved in or the like?
Yeah, so I also was in AAF at UTA. I was the president my senior year, and I had been in some other organizations and was in leadership. So kind of transitioning to AAF at UTA, it really helped me bridge the gap between leadership in organizations and leadership in professional organizations, and kind of how that could turn in, help me in the workplace. So after I graduated, I joined AAF Fort Worth and went on to through the education chair first, and then did the Addie Gala chair, and that was a lot of fun to really get to be on the other side of the Addies and get celebrate such amazing work in Fort Worth and see the whole community come together. I think that was kind of my favorite part. But really just making those connections with people in a different setting, because you're not really asking them for anything. You're just there to be friends with them and to talk to them. And so that it makes it easier when you say you do want some advice, or maybe you're looking for a job, to be able to call on those people, and they like you for, as a friend, so they're going to help you out. And it's not so this like push-pull concept, when sometimes people just reach out to people on LinkedIn or something.
Yeah. Really great. Awesome. Stephanie?
So I wasn't in ad to or specific organizations like that when I was at UTA. I was in other kind of leadership or other organizations where I had a leadership role. And I think at that stage in my life, it really helped with getting me comfortable just speaking in front of groups of people, in front of groups of people I don't know. That can be a big challenge when you're starting out. As of right now, we have within Publicis Groupe, they're called BRGs, business resource groups. And I mean, they span the spectrum of what people, of all the different things you're looking for. I'm specifically involved in, it's a women's group. It's called Viva Women. And it just kind of helps connect you across the group. So not just with my agency, but with sister agencies of women that are in leadership positions. And similar to what Erika was saying earlier, it just gives you insight into perspective of people who are working in different facets of advertising that I'm not involved in. It also gives you some transparency and insight into people who are at higher levels or just starting out. So I am involved in a couple of those.
All right, great, awesome. All right, let's see, another question. Let's see. So are there any sort of innovations that you're seeing in the ad industry, or something that, is really standing out to you and is like, oh, wow, this is the future of advertising now? Let's see. Let's go ahead and start with Bethanne.
Let me think about that. As far as just innovations we're seeing kind of overall.
Maybe related to COVID, or just something that you thought was like, oh, that's like, that could like change the industry.
For me, working at a full service marketing agency and not maybe like a digital specific, I think for me, it's just showing that everything is becoming more about the consumer. Like every single day, it's about the journey. Everything has to be integrated. And I think it's really just changing to make even more of those experiences integrated than they ever had before. I've talked to friends who work at maybe larger agencies, are more segregated in their own, say, digital or public relations or social or whatever, and just that everyone's having to really pull it together and merge to break through that clutter, because just being good in one tactical area is just not enough anymore.
Erika, have you noticed anything or say anything to that point?
Yeah, from a digital perspective, I've noticed that catering to a shopper preference has been probably the biggest change. Messaging around curbside pickup or buy online, pickup in store, and giving, especially through Q4 holiday season that we're coming into right now, a lot of the things that we're changing messaging for is to let consumer know, hey, if you don't feel comfortable and you don't feel safe right now doing it this way, which is the traditional way, you wake up, you're like, oh, today I'm going to go shopping. And you go to the store and you go shopping and you buy what you're going to buy. Hey, you can shop it online and you can literally walk in, pick it up, and walk out. Or if you don't want anybody to do anything, touch anything, see anything, like pull up your car, honk your horn twice, we'll put it in the back seat and you can keep going. And I've found that to be a really big trend that I'm seeing. And not just a COVID trend, but even just making people's lives easier as we're getting to a time that things have been open for some time and people do have the ability to go inside and shop. As long as you're wearing a mask, I've just found that has been staying consistent. The messaging of saying, hey, we can cater to your preferences as a consumer has continuously been a theme throughout the year.
All right. And then Stephanie?
Yeah, I would say to piggyback off of that, just the entire shift towards more digital first and digital based experiences, and not necessarily just from like an experiential perspective, but all around. The technology's consistently improving. You have augmented reality and virtual reality, which a few years ago weren't quite as readily adopted, but it's a lot easier to seamlessly tie those in to all different facets of advertising. So whether you're doing something with social, with experiential, it's just a shift to what Erika was saying, and Bethanne as well. More highly personalized, convenient ways to tie into your consumer. I think overall that's just where the industry's headed, and the innovations overall.
All right. I think you all kind of like filled up all of my questions or answered all of them. Roby, is there anything that maybe I didn't cover that maybe you'd like these ladies to talk about?
So are all of you all double majors when you were at UTA?
Yes.
And it was advertising and public relations. So speak to what you think double majoring, the advantage that it gave you as somebody that went out looking for a job versus somebody that might have either just been public relations or somebody that might have just been PR. And, we'll start with Stephanie.
Sure. I mean, as far as job hunting, I think it did kind of help to have both of those on a resume, and to be able to show I had a working understanding of both industries going in. I think more than anything, though, like in my current position, it's just been so helpful when tying in and working with other agencies. When working on client work, it's not just solely working with other departments within my specific agency, but it's a lot of working on integrated campaigns with other agencies. So tying into PR a lot, tying into a lot of digital-based agencies, and just having that kind of fundamental understanding of what they're doing, their perspective when they're approaching projects. It's just made everything a lot easier compared to some of my coworkers who only had a focus predominantly in PR or what have you.
Super. Erika?
I would have to agree. I think initially starting out for looking for a job, I think it was a highlight purely from the sense of a lot of the positions that I was applying for were very detailed and focused in on communicating effectively and detailed oriented. And I think having the public relations experience and knowing like you really can't make too many mistakes in PR. Professor Whittier was a great professor, but the number one thing that stuck with me and has stuck with me today is like you can't make more than 3 punctuation, spelling, or grammar mistakes in an article or anything that you're submitting to her, or you're going to get a 0. And I know that sounds harsh, but going through my process and hiring process, it was so easy for me to communicate to say, I check, double check, and triple check my work. And I am oriented in this facet because of this. Whereas in advertising, I think a lot of things move super fast and you're more trained on how to strategically flip between multiple things versus getting into the nitty gritty technicalities. And I think those two traits work well together and helped me in finding a job and pushing through a career because I could mix the two and I could depend on one or the other depending on my situation.
Super. And Bethanne?
I would have to agree. I think it definitely made, when I was looking for a job, like a lot more versatile. But in my day-to-day, I think my advertising major really helps me with more of the tactical, like getting things done from that perspective. But the PR side has helped me with the relationship aspect and like having that relationship with clients and being able to communicate to my teammates like, hey, we might not think that we might not want to do that. That's not such a great idea. This is how it could be perceived, or this is how someone, maybe an outside perspective, could take it, and really just kind of having that conscious mindset to throw up the flag before things keep going too far. But both really just make you have a holistic approach in looking at how it can affect everyone versus just getting it done.
Very good. So speaking about mistakes, Erika, you mentioned that you actually interview or hire people for positions. What do you see are some of the mistakes that students make when they're interviewing or just having come on board, when you have new people that are on board like the girl that you were talking about that had just been there a month, what are the mistakes that you see most often, and what advice would you give students when they're interviewing and starting their first job?
I think whenever you're interviewing, making sure, this sounds so cliche, and I know everybody says this, but if you just take the time to read about the agency, I have had people say off the wall things about something creative, and I'm like, we are not a creative agency, we are a digital agency. So those little nuances that come with just reading up to see what the agency's history are, and then also asking actual questions that matter in an interview. Just shows me that you're engaged in what the position is and what the position is entailing, not just asking those generic ones that you search super fast on Google, but if you've had a preliminary or you know what this role is going to entail, or the client specifically, tailoring your questions to go through that. And then I think whenever you do get hired, again, curiosity. I have seen so many people that just kind of sit and they wait to be told what to do. But asking the right questions, not being afraid to speak up in a meeting, even if it's your first meeting, and saying, hey, to tag what Stephanie said, I don't understand. I don't know what this is. Or even if you just ping somebody on the side, I'm a very big fan of that. If you don't know and you're embarrassed to ask in a group, tell your manager, tell a coworker, hey, I don't get it. Can you help me? Because if you're afraid to be judged by everybody, at least just trust one person that you can ask all your questions to, and they're not going to judge you and they're going to be willing to help. It really pushes you ahead to just sit back, ask the questions that you don't know, and actually be concerned with what are the next steps and how can I start to dig in.
So Bethanne, what would you give as advice to students that are just kind of starting out? Same question.
I think kind of the same thing. I feel like I've seen with some of our interns in the past through various jobs that they do just sit on projects and maybe they just have questions or they don't know how to do it. And instead of raising the flag right then, they kind of just sit on it and don't really communicate that they don't know what's going on. So I think just communicating that, hey, I don't know, and getting help early on versus waiting till the deadline and then saying, oh no, I didn't understand, I didn't do it, and your boss or whatever was counting on you to kind of get that going. So I think just asking questions up front and not being scared to jump in and, like everyone said, look stupid.
And Stephanie, your thoughts?
I think speaking specifically to students that are just going into interviews, you feel so silly when people say practice, but practice, because, and by practice, I mean, the biggest thing I've noticed with people that I've interviewed who are just starting out or coming into an introductory position or junior level, they're so nervous. And a big thing that I'm looking for is I don't expect them to know everything. They're just starting out, but I want to be able to hire somebody who's comfortable holding a conversation, who isn't super nervous, is just kind of able to go with the flow, if that makes any sense. And I think you get that by practicing being comfortable with not just what's on your resume, but to what Erika was saying, what Bethanne was saying, doing your research on the agency and the position you're tying into. But I think it's just practicing and being comfortable going into the interview. So often people are really nervous and they're very stiff, and it's hard to get a real gauge or sense of who the person is that you're interviewing.
Great, super. So just a follow up to that. How important do you think it would be for students when you're talking about practicing? How do you get the practice? Do you think they should be going on interviews or talking to people while they're still in college?
I think going on interviews is the best practice you're going to get. But I remember when I was at UTA, there was a resource where you could go in and do mock interviews, and that was so helpful. I also practiced with my parents, with my brother, with friends. I mean, I also think if you just sit down and, you kind of draft out what are the standard interview questions you get asked, and you kind of map out your answer, and then you can literally practice in a mirror. I did. It might sound stupid, but just doing that ahead of time made me feel comfortable. So when I sat down for the interview, I wasn't stumbling over my words. I wasn't, so afraid of how to get it out. It was more conversational because I've been comfortable in practicing on it.
Erika, I see you shaking your head a lot.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with those things. Practicing I know at UTA there are plenty of board positions, leadership positions, organizations that all require you to get interviewed in order to have those positions. And if you're not interested in staying integrated with the university to get that practice, and I know that's something that came easier for me when I graduated because I had so many other things on campus that I was involved in. I had gone through interviews with like, hey, you got to go talk to the head VP of whatever. And I'm now not afraid to talk to the head VP of an agency. But then also, this sounds really stupid, but practicing with your roommate or your college dorm mate, whoever it is so beneficial, especially if you guys take it out of the room, go to like a common area where there's other people around so that you have some distractions pulled in so that it feels more realistic, because you're going to be in an environment that you don't know when you go to interview. So making sure you're kind of used to a distraction, someone walking up, how do you start and stop if something gets interrupted, but giving yourself as much of a realistic experience. And even if it is with somebody that you're comfortable with, having them sit there and ask, and like, if you didn't answer the question in full, be like, so what do you mean by that? To really help pull it out of you so that you can hear yourself, and then them to give you feedback to say, I feel like that was a little long-winded and you could have cut out this, so that you both are getting that practice that you need. And to hear somebody else just tell you like, you didn't need to say all that, you could have just said this, and that would have been a great answer.
Bethanne, anything to add?
I would just add that it might sound very silly, but I think filming yourself really helps, because especially for kind of like standard questions of like, tell me about yourself, like those very just, they're asked in every interview. If you can really get those hard kind of standard questions down, I think it opens up space, and it'll calm you down to show your personality and kind of be able to give real, like on the fly answers to maybe those questions that you weren't prepared for, just because you've already kind of got the other ones out of the way. So I think just if you can really watch how you're watch your body language, watch how you're talking, and just kind of like what the other person would be viewing if you don't have someone that you can practice with one-on-one.
Very good. Thank you. So we've been going for a pretty good little time here, and you guys have done really great. My last question would be, is there anything that you would like to share with advertising students that are still in college that we haven't covered today? So, and we'll start with Erika.
I think if you can go out and get an internship in something relevant, do it. And if you can't because you don't have the time, it doesn't pay, whatever that may be, talk to somebody that does something that you're interested in. Your professors probably do know somebody that's in that field or that can get you close to someone in that field. Ask those questions so that you have a better understanding of what you want to do. So many times I see college students who graduate and they're like, oh, I want to design creative. And I'm like, did you take classes specifically to make something? Because if that's what you want to do, then I don't think an advertising degree is the best one. You probably need an art degree to get through that. So before you get there, when you're really looking to see, oh, I want to do this, really talk or ask or get some experience in that thing. Because like, for example, when I was a sophomore, I had an internship at Sabre. And I was their internal communications intern. And I found out very fast, as much as I loved my PR degree, that I was not cut out for corporate communication. And if I didn't know that, I think I would have graduated and I would have applied for a job in that and I would have hated it. But I got the experience early on and I was able to say, okay, I don't like this, but I did meet the social media director who gave me a whole lot of insight into some things that were relevant to my advertising degree. And I was able to say, okay, maybe I can flip the script here. And then with AAF and Ad2, I was able to actually talk to somebody in those positions. And I was like, oh yeah, you talk a lot? Me too, I talk a lot. I think I could be an account manager. Let's try that out.
Yeah, boy, you talk a lot. So, Bethanne, anything else that you'd like to add?
I think I would just add that don't get so caught up in the work that you forget about the people around you. There's so many great people on your your classmates, your professors, people you meet in your internships, and just really keep those relationships going, even if it's just simply as staying connected to them on LinkedIn or social media, because you never know when they're going to come back around in your life as maybe a potential client, or you could be interviewing for a job and one of them happened to be in the room, and that's how those connections kind of start early, and just making mentors at different levels in your career. Not every mentor you have to have is 15 years into their career where you want to be. Your mentor could be the person who is 1 year ahead of you or 5 years ahead of you, and they're probably going to be a lot better at giving you that real conversation, just because they're not as far removed as maybe 15 years out.
Thank you. And Stephanie, anything you'd like to add?
I'll just echo what Erika said. I think internships. And if you can't dedicate, like she said, that time, because a lot of them are unpaid, and that's really tough if that's not something that you can work into your schedule. You can volunteer for one-off things. When I was in college, I had a few internships, but for ones that I couldn't swing, I volunteered a few times. And whether that was showing up at an event or helping draft some key messages, or whatever it was, anything that you can add to your resume and to your experience, it's only going to help you when you go into the job field. Because so often you get into an interview and you're looking at an applicant's resume and you're like, okay, but what have you done? How do you know that you like this position? Just anything to kind of help guide you towards what you want to do. And be able to show the initiative ahead of getting into your field.
Well, I do have a follow-up question to that because it's different now. So in the time of COVID, can you speak to the idea of internships and how somebody might go about finding one of those and interviewing for one of those and working through one of those when we're also, everybody's in a different place today? How that might work?
For sure. I think in the traditional sense of interning at an agency or a company, I know speaking for my agency, we're in the midst of working out how that's going to come to life in 2021.
So you guys don't really have a fully realized plan around that?
No, because we're still working from home indefinitely. I mean, we're not going back into the office until maybe February of next year. If I were to put myself in a student's position right now, I would say reach out to local nonprofits. I think that's an industry that's struggling and needs a lot of help, just in terms of resources. I think taking the initiative to email, the Stew Pot in Dallas, they're a homeless shelter, seeing what kind of help they need, whether it's from a communication standpoint, helping to organize. I also think that the internships and the things that you put on your resume, they don't have to necessarily translate one-to-one. If you can pull out like very critical skills that you need in the industry, like organizing, communicating, just little things that you can kind of tie back to, while it may not be that you interned at an agency or some type of communications field, you show that you have those kind of foundational skills and you got that from, whatever the XYZ position was.
Okay, super. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks to Alex Rojas for moderating the panel, and thank you to Bethanne Glover and Erika Long and to Stephanie Hillas. We appreciate the time that you've taken today to visit and to share your insights. We thank you very much.